is going on, guys? Welcome back to the channel. I apologize. I took a hiatus for a little bit. Uh, Life got busy, COVID, things of that nature. So, I want to pick back up on the PowerShell tutorial series, and I want to start looking at do loops and if-else statements. These can be extremely useful when creating installation setups. So let's say you've got a bunch of computers that you want to install the same software on. You can have this check to see if the software is already installed. If it is, it'll bypass it, move on, and go on to the next thing. If it's not, it'll check against it and go, okay, it's not here, let's install it, and then it'll do everything it needs to do to install the application. With some of these applications, though, you still have to interact with them. So if you've got an application that's got, it requires you to accept a license agreement and the terms of use and those types of things, you still have to go through those unless it has a silent install feature, which some of them do. It just depends on the application and if there's a command line instance that you can run and install it with little to no interaction. But the first thing I want to talk about is whenever we go to execute a script, we have to make sure that PowerShell is going to allow it. And that is by using set execution policy. So if we do get execution, as you can see it autofills, it'll return back the execution policy that's currently set up for us. So if we take a look at our PowerShell, if you give me a minute, there's a little PowerShell console down below. We'll make this a little bit bigger. If we click down below, we do get execution policy, returns bypass. So it's bypassing everything right now. So normally what we run on this is remote signed. Oh, syntax error right there. So we want to set it. We already got it. We want to set execution policy. PowerShell is extremely intuitive. If there's very few matches, you can always hit the tab key. So if you're on set and you hit the dash line, it can scroll through everything that you can set in PowerShell. So you kind of want to narrow down until you know the least amount of letters that you can put into auto tab and auto complete the command that you're looking for. And set execution policy is one of those. If you do EX, there's literally nothing else in PowerShell. That's it. That's the only thing that exists is set EX, is set execution policy. So as you're typing it out, you can type in set-EX and hit the tab key and it'll auto complete that commandlet for you. So what we want is remote signed. It helps when you run things in administrator mode. So hang on one second. See if we can get PowerShell to come up. I want to add a source, window capture, PowerShell. Okay, so right now, if we were to do set execution policy, remote signed, and we hit A, or enter, excuse me, the execution policy helps protect you from scripts that you do not trust. Changing the execution policy might expose you to the security risks described in the About Execution Policies help topic at Microsoft's website. Do you want to change these? I always hit A for just yes to all. Once that's set, you can execute scripts in PowerShell on that computer. So generally the first step that I like to put in sometimes on my scripts is I will set execution policy within my scripts automatically, because it makes things a little bit easier if it just autofills it. want to do that right there. Sometimes the A will take, sometimes it won't. Basically, I just autofill the A if I can, so that way it just automatically does what I want it to do. The other thing that I generally put at the beginning of my scripts is I like to auto-size my box and change the background colors, which we'll get into a little bit later, but I generally set the window size, because some of these commandlets, when you execute them and you go to print them out into a text file or an Excel file, you'll get the 3 dots at the end of it telling you that there's more information that PowerShell's not showing you. So I always try and set it to the max width and the max height that I can before it will actually yell at me and say, hey, I can't do this. It's too big, so we're going to default to this size. But what it does do is it does basically tell PowerShell, I want all of the information that you're going to give me no matter what. So the way we can set the window size is by typing in a variable, psHost is equal to getHost. The next thing we want to do is put another variable in called psWindow, and that's going to be equal to psHost.ui.raw UI. Ooh, I turned the caps lock on. Sorry, I got a new keyboard, so I'm still trying to get used to the finger spacing, so don't mind the typos, because they're going to be aplenty. So once we put that in, the next thing we want to do is create another variable called new size, and that's going to be equal to variable psWindow dot buffer size. So let's tab that over. We'll go new size dot height. It's going to be equal to 3000, and then we're going to go new size dot width is equal to 240. So the height and the width is going to depend on your monitor. Your monitor size has X amount of lines height-wise and X amount of lines width-wise. So you have to make sure that you know the dimensions of it. And you can get that within PowerShell a lot of the times on its own. If you click on the upper portion of PowerShell, you can go to Properties and you can get what the buffer size is. So you can look at the terminal size and know roughly how big it's supposed to be. So you click on Layout, and it tells you screen buffer size. Excuse me, I got a frog in my throat tonight. Your width size is 120, height is 300. Notice how the box in the black area is representative of that. So if we want to adjust the window size, what we're going to do is we're just going to click on the up arrows. So I want to say, you know, max is 60, and I want to do, let's say, max of 240. Adversely, you can just type it in manually, and then you can always adjust the window positioning. So typing it at 150 should roughly center the window in the screen, and you can tweak this if you want it to be dead smack in the middle. You can just put 0, 0, and that should center in the upper left hand corner, and then believe the middle of the screen is 50-50. Maybe not. Like I said, it depends on your screen size, so you can play around with it and you can kind of figure it out. So your height and your width, you want to adjust to the size of your monitors, and don't worry about getting it 100% exact. If you get it wrong, PowerShell is going to tell you, hey, I can't do this, it's too big, so we're just going to set it to this default size. So once we've got that situated, we can then come back into our script and we can continue on. And what we're going to do after this is we're going to do variable psWindow dot buffer size is equal to variable new size, and then variable new size is going to be equal to, oops, I didn't return. Here we go. Excuse me 1 second, guys.
Mic off. Mic on.
I apologize for the seductive lady speaking to you. I forgot to turn my desktop audio down, and that would be my headset telling you mic on, mic off. Anywho, so we're going to do new size, and we're going to do equal PS window dot window size. And then we're going to continue on. We're going to go new size dot height. It's going to be equal to 65. And then variable new size dot width is going to be equal to 240. And then we're going to put in the last variable of PS window dot window size. It's going to be equal to new window, new size. Okay, so notice this block of code. It's got a lot of variables in it. Remember how we said variables just store information that we either call in PowerShell or that we manually input into PowerShell. So PS host is going to be equal to get host. And what that looks like, if we look down below, if I can learn to type tonight, we might be a little bit better off. Get host returns certain information. Now remember when I said variables can be told to pull certain information. So if we look, the first variable is going to return this block of information down below. And what we're really looking for is this .ui, raw UI. So we want to take this UI information, this user interface information, which is an automatic system generated information set for whatever defaults are set for PowerShell. So system.management.automation.internal.host.internal.host.internal-host user interface. So we're going to take this and we're going to drill it down just a little bit more into the raw UI. And that's basically looking at the raw window size of PowerShell. And it's going to pull it and store it in a variable. And then we're saying, okay, we want to take a new size, so we're going to create a new variable. And new size is going to be equal to PS window, which is this variable. So it's going to be the pshost.ui.rawui. And it's going to pull out the buffer size on that. So these are all sub information sets that we can pull out. And what that should look like. Alright. That didn't work the way I wanted it to, so we'll do it this way. Okay, so here is the information that it pulled. So this is everything that's stored in the variable. We've got our foreground color, background color, current position, window size, window position, current size, buffer size, everything that we're wanting to modify to automatically size the window and place it. So once we take this variable and we get the buffer size, so remember, as I just did right above, I did the get host in parentheses with the .ui.rawui, and that's a sublet information of that commandlet. So remember back when we were looking at things and we wanted to store like an object GUI ID, on the end of the commandlet, if we're targeting a certain set of information we want to store within that variable, we can tell it parenthesis get host end parenthesis dot whatever. And in this case, it's .ui.rawui to pull the information of the window. So now that we have all this information stored, we can start working with these other variables that are in here, and we can adjust the window size automatically. So at the beginning of every one of my scripts, I just automatically resize the window to a default size that just spits out a certain width. So if we were to take this, copy it. Now mind you, this is going to error out because we're not in administrator mode right now, so this get execution, set execution policy, it's going to fail out. Actually, that is a complete and incorrect syntax of that, so let's just get rid of the get. We'll arrow over here. Actually, can we just go home. There we go. Home key and end key are your friends. They live by the delete key and the insert button, but it allows you to quickly get to the end or the beginning of a code. Set execution policy remote signed. It should error out because we are not, again, in administrator mode, so I'm okay with that. And this may not necessarily execute correctly, so you know what? Let's just do that. And we can kill this console. We'll kill that and we'll restart the terminal for the integrated, and we have another PowerShell instance right there. So what we can do is we can look at PowerShell, and since we've got this copied already, we take this. Come on, OBS, play nice. Thank you. Let's center that for you guys for a second. So if we paste everything in here, it's going to say, oops, something went wrong. That's completely fine. I don't care, because what we're looking for is this set of code. So when we hit enter, see, you know, if I had any brain cells tonight, I would be better off. But you know, I can't do it. So I don't know if you noticed the quick little shift and everything, but just to show you what the resizing looks like, it automatically resizes the window. And that is because we've taken all these sub parameters that we've basically configured ourselves, and we've told PowerShell this is the width and the size of the window that we want to execute with. So it's just going to automatically resize that for you, which is a really, really, really nice thing, because sometimes you've got a little bit of extra information that some of your scripts might pull, and you want to make sure that you get all that information in there so you can have the full picture of whatever you're trying to execute and pull off. So just bear that in mind. This is something that I do. You don't have to do it. I just thought it was a cool little trick for you guys to see, so you could adjust the window size automatically. It's kind of a neat little parlor trick, so you can show people, hey, look, you know, I can adjust my window size, and I don't even have to look at it, and it just automatically does it. It's completely up to you. Like I said, it's just something that I do just because I know PowerShell is going to cut off information if I don't tell it a certain window size that I want. So getting back to our code and moving on with our script. So do loops are amazing. Do loops allow us to take a statement that says do XYZ while this condition isn't met. And the way you form a do statement is it's simply do, and then you put a curly bracket. So inside of this do loop, let's say do get host name, or let's just get host, right? So I want to do get host, okay, and I want to store that in a variable, so let's do host info is equal to get host dot UI dot raw UI. Okay, so let's just pull that information so we can put it in a variable and just call it up whenever we want. Okay, and I want to do this until I got information that's stored. So really this is really what I use this for. You know what? This is a terrible example. Let's do what I normally use this for, and that's to install a program, and then I'm going to challenge it and make sure that the program's actually installed correctly, so that way I know. So one of the most popular ones that I always do is Adobe Acrobat Reader DC. So one of the first things that I'm going to do is I'm going to write host. And remember, write host just prints it on the screen so that person can just see it. There's no interaction that's required, unlike read host, where you have the read host dash prompt and you want the user to input, which we'll see here in a second. So I'm going to write host, and I'm going to put a quotation mark. It double quotes, it's nice. Please wait installing Adobe Acrobat Reader DC, end quote. Okay, so my next line is going to say start process, and let's just say quote, the drive is in the F drive, so it's computer setup files backslash Adobe Reader. So Adobe, dirty little secret, so let's do this before we forget. Adobe does not like to play nice. Anytime that you use one of its installers, it likes to use it up, make it go bye-bye, so you have to go back to their site and re-download it and go through all their questions and answers. Do you want McAfee? Yes or no? Do you want this? Yes or no? I get one installer and then I make a copy of it. If you make a copy of it and move it to the machine or the file location that you want to use it out of, it'll use it from there and it'll leave the copy alone. So let's do copy item. We're going to do quote F:\\/ computer setup files. We want a reader. We're going to tell it destination. We're going to leave it on the F drive. Quote F \. So we're just going to make a single copy of that. And we're going to move the file over. And what that looks like when you do this, so let's copy this real quick, and we'll actually throw it up in PowerShell so you guys can see what it's doing. Let's add another source. We're going to do a window capture 3, and let's just do File Exploder. Okay, so File Explorer is now open. We're going to shrink this because we don't need it to be that big. So here's our File Explorer, right? We've got a couple of PowerShell scripts that I've worked on there for a little bit. And then here's all of my base install files. And we got Chrome, Firefox, power config changes, and then here's our reader, right? So we want to take a copy of this and we want to move it into the F drive, the root drive. So in PowerShell, we're going to tell it copy item F:\, full file path and the file that we want to move and where we want to put it. So that's that dash destination F \, or F:\. And what that's going to do is it's going to take a copy of what we requested and it's going to move it. So now here's our F drive and there is a copy of the installer. So cute little trick. Adobe is one of those. So if you know you have an application that likes to use itself up and you have to go out and get a new installer every time, I recommend just telling PowerShell to make a copy of it and move it to a different file location and tell PowerShell to call that file location, so that way you don't have to keep re-downloading it, because I promise you it was the most frustrating thing until I used my brain cells and started copying things. So now that PowerShell is there, let's minimize these two windows for right now, and let's go back to our script. So we've copied our item, okay, so we set execution policy, remote signed, A for all, we adjust our window size, and then we're going to copy this item to the new file location of F. So we can change the start process to just simply the file that we want to execute and start the process on. And once that is done, I like to start something called sleep. And what that's going to do is it's going to tell PowerShell to just pause. I want you to go to sleep for however many seconds I tell you to go to sleep for. And I typically will give Adobe about 2 minutes to fully download, install on newer computers that have M.2 drives or an SSD drive and have, you know, an Intel Core i5 or higher in it. If you have a slower computer, you can adjust this time The reason I put this pause in is because of the next thing that I have it do, and that's an if statement to confirm whether or not Adobe has installed correctly or it has not installed correctly. So it'll make a little bit more sense once we've done that. So let's just say 120 seconds. And after that pause, we're going to create a variable called confirm Adobe. We're going to set this equal to if. So inside of our do loop, we're going to create an if statement. And this if statement is basically going to look at a commandlet, and it's going to go true or false. So it's a Boolean value. This is a yes or a no. There's no putting in a variable and getting fancy. You know, if you put an if statement in there, it is going to be a yes or no question. So this is a very limited scope unless you change it completely to modify what you want. So what I do is I'm going to put in here parenthesis, parenthesis. So I want double parentheses because Adobe will either install an x86 file format or it's going to install in the normal x64. So I have it check both locations. And the way you can do that is called test path. And what this looks like is C:\\. How about program files? x86 / Adobe / Acrobat Reader DC, end quote. So while we're still inside of the first set of parentheses, we're going to put in or statement in there. So we're telling this if test path C program files x86 / Adobe Acrobat Reader DC or test path, and we're going to do the non-x86, so the x64 version. Put another set of parentheses in here. Test path, quote C:\\, program files, Adobe Acrobat Reader DC, end quote, end. So this is our first part of an if statement. There's multiple parts to this, and you want to make sure that you get your syntax right, or this is going to fail. If statements can be very challenging in the beginning to fully understand the way they work, just because of the way they're written. You have to remember the first part of an if-else statement is got to be a commandlet that's going to return a true or false value. So now that I've got my two arguments in there, I've got two test paths, one for program files, Adobe Acrobat Reader DC, in x86, or in program files. I'm going to put a curly bracket, and I'm going to put in right host, and because this is the positive value, it's checking for it. It's going to say Adobe Acrobat Reader DC has installed, has completed installation. And we're going to end the curly bracket. So now the second part of the if statement is an if else. Okay, so we're going to return down and we're going to tab in. And we're going to say else. We're going to do the same thing. We got to put a parenthesis in and we say else right host Adobe Acrobat Reader DC has failed to complete installation. Please troubleshoot, and please troubleshoot, reboot, and try installation again. Okay, so we're going to end that. So now, oh, see, I forgot a step. You got to put your curly brackets. Why? Because otherwise, it's looking for a commandlet for a true-false statement, and it does not like it. Alright, so now this is our basic commandlet inside of the do loop. Okay, and remember I said that we have to have a challenge for the do loop, and it's a do while. So at least the do loops that I use are do while loops. So that basically says do this while XYZ is this or not this. So the way we write this out is we're going to return down and we put in while confirm Adobe is equal to false. Okay, so the easiest way to understand how you set up your do while loops is read it out in such a manner that makes sense and the sentence makes sense. So do install Adobe Acrobat Reader DC while confirm Adobe is equal to false. So as soon as confirm Adobe, this upper part of this if statement becomes true, this will execute and exit the loop. So I'm going to go into my control panel really quick and I'm going to uninstall Adobe, because I want you guys to see how this actually executes and works, because it makes things much easier. So we're going to uninstall Acrobat Reader real quick. And it is done. Okay, so since we're going to run this as a script, I'm going to remove that copied file of Adobe that we moved earlier, and I'm going to save this in our file location here in a second, and we can be done with it. So what I want to look at real quick, yes. The other thing that I always put at the end of my Adobe statements or my Adobe installs is get process. Typically when I do this, it's on a fresh install of Windows, and unfortunately the default browser is MS Edge. But this should launch Chrome, because my default browser, actually, just kidding, my default browser is not Chrome, it is Opera. So normally what I'll do is get process dash name Opera. We'll pipe this out and we'll say stop process. Because I'm a neat freak, I have to have things quoted. I love quotes, especially when it comes to strings, because you can never ever get into that situation of I don't understand. So we'll close out Opera real quick, because it's going to auto launch it and then it's going to kill that task. So now that this is in here, so let's put a start sleep in here as well. We'll do seconds 5. So once it gets all the information from our confirm, we're going to have it pause for 5 seconds, and then we're going to have it pull the process of Opera, and then it's going to execute and kill that process, so it's no longer running, because Adobe likes to just automatically launch and say, hey, thanks for installing Adobe, here's more bloatware. And I don't necessarily like that, so I want to make sure that we can just kill it flat out, and we're done with it. And I think the actual name is opera.exe, which is fine. By the way, guys, I'm using a browser called Opera Gaming Browser. It's a little plug-ola for them. I've been using it. It's based on Chromium. The reason I've switched from Chrome to this is, one, I have more customizability for my colors and my schemes, but also it has a RAM and CPU utilization limiter. It's kind of nice. You should go check it out. It's called Opera GX, as in George X-ray, G as in George, X as in X-ray browser. So if you've been looking for a new browser, you want to get away from Chrome because it's just RAM hungry, and we all know the memes. You open Chrome and all your RAM's gone. Well, close Chrome. It's been a really good browser so far. There are some features that don't work just yet because I believe it's still a beta version, but eventually it's going to be feature packed and it's going to be pretty darn awesome. So now that this is all set up and done, we're going to file save as, and we're going to call this install Adobe, not Adobe, install Adobe. So we're going to save that. It's now, as you can see, name at the top is install Adobe. So now that this is saved, we can execute this in PowerShell. And what that's going to look like is, we'll come over here, we'll go into Capture Window 2. What is Window 3? Oh, File Explorer. So, in here, the way we launch a PowerShell script is you need to change your directory to match where this file is being stored. So, change directory is the old school command line version. You can do CD, but the actual name is set location in PowerShell. And you should be able to get alias CD. So if you do get alias of any sort of shorthand term from, it does pretty well with Linux, it does well with command line interfaces. So if you know that you're using an alias and you want to know the actual term for it, you can do get alias and it'll return a full list of aliases, which is what this is. So you do get alias and you can look and scroll through. Ours was CD, so it's an alias for set location. The other one that I absolutely love is clear in CLS. They both do the same thing. Clear is clear host, CLS is clear host. I use that for a lot of my menus. I think in the next video I'm actually going to show you guys how to build an interactive menu for multiple installers and how to loop that all through. So look for that coming up here shortly. That's going to build on what this is, just because of the simple fact that there is so much that you can do with PowerShell menus. It'll have a change in background color, it's going to have multiple install options, and it's all going to be nested code that you have your menu option and you can choose which one you want to install, and once it's done, it's going to take the copied over files, it's going to remove them from the system, and then it's going to return you back to that menu so you can actually install another program, or you can hit Q for quit the application and it just terminates back into the normal PowerShell interface, which is kind of nice. So now that we've done this, we want to change our directory. So CLS, clear screen, we're back to a nice clean PowerShell. So we're going to do CD, and again, I quote everything, F:\\end quote. So we're now in the F drive. And the way we're going to call this PowerShell script, you can do it one of two ways. The easiest way I find is from within PowerShell, especially in an administrator PowerShell, just because when you go into the file and you right-click on Run with PowerShell, if your system isn't automatically set to launch PowerShell in an administrator mode, your installation may fail because it is not at administrator level. So just make sure you know what it's going to require when you're executing these scripts. Like I said, I always just execute it right from within PowerShell itself, because then I know it's an administrator level and I shouldn't have any issues doing what I'm doing. So you're going to put a period and a backslash in. And what this is doing is it's telling PowerShell, hey, in this directory I want you to locate this file. And we called this install Adobe. Again, tab is your friend. You don't have to type out the full file name. You can get most of the way through it. If there's nothing else similar to it, you can type the first couple of characters, hit tab, and then hit enter, and you're off and running. So period backslash install adobe.ps1, and that's telling PowerShell I want to execute this ps1 script. And as soon as we hit enter, it's going to do set execution policy. It's going to automatically change what we want. And if you notice, Adobe is already going to be installing on my computer So as this executes, it's going to download a brand new installation of Adobe. It's going to install it, and then once it's done, I always uncheck the box to launch Adobe, just because of the simple fact that I don't particularly care to open it. I know it's going to work. If it's installed, it's going to be perfectly fine. It's a PDF viewer. I don't need to look at it. Alright, so Adobe's now in the installation phase. It also likes to fake you out and say, oh, I only got to 57%, and then all of a sudden it's done. So just bear in mind that, see, it was only at 59% and it said it was done. So here are our pauses here. So we're going to click Finish, and it's now opened the Opera browser. Let's see if I can get to this before it closes it. I don't think I'm going to be able to. Window capture 5. No, I don't want that. I just want Opera. There we go. So Adobe Acrobat Reader has completed installation. So I didn't do anything. My cursor is right here, and it automatically closed out Opera. It's that little menu. Thanks for downloading and installing Adobe. I know it's going to do it. I just have Adobe automatically get closed within whatever browser I know is going to be default at the time of the installation of this program. So we literally just installed Adobe, and we only interacted with it once, and that was to uncheck Open Adobe and just click Finish. And once you click Finish, it launches the web browser, and then the script pauses and hangs for a little bit, and it goes off about its way. So that is your basic do loop, your do while loop, with an if statement challenge to acknowledge the file has been installed. So if we go back into our script, the other way you can do this is your confirm Adobe. You can, we're going to copy this. We're just going to put it down below. I'm not going to run it twice. I just want you guys to see that there is a different way to do it without using an if statement. If statements are nice because you don't have to interact with it. So if your goal is to create a script that has minimalistic interaction on your end, use an if statement. If you want to have that interaction to confirm yes or no this has installed, you can always just put in a yes or no, and it'll make things a little bit more interactive for you. But the way that looks is we're going to keep the same, actually let's call this confirm Adobe 1 so we don't get it confused. So notice the yellow squiggly line that was underneath confirm Adobe 1, and what this is telling you is, hey, confirm Adobe 1 is a variable but it's not used. So once we add that in there, the squiggly line goes away because it's now being called. So the other way that you can do this is you could do confirm Adobe 1 is equal to read host dash prompt quote did Adobe Reader DC installation complete question mark yes/no end quote. Okay, so that's the first part of it. So now we have to go down to where our while part of this is, and we have to change this a little bit. So we want to set this so EQ is equal to, and E is not equal to. We're going to put a quote. While it's not equal to yes, I want you to continue to do this, is what we're saying. So now our do loop is contingent upon us interacting with it, and once the installation of Adobe has finished, this is going to pause and wait for your input, and then continue on with the start sleep and get process and kill whatever browser that you have automatically defaulted to open up in. So this is another way that you can use a do loop. This way is nice when you have a large file and you want to make sure that it did install correctly, and the installation didn't hang up, because there are those instances where something's going to go to install. It's going to create the directory that I'm having it look at with this test path, but there may not be anything in there. And all this test path is going to do is it's just going to test to see if this path exists. It doesn't care if there's anything in there, but as long as that directory, this Adobe Acrobat reader directory, exists, this is going to return true, and it's going to move on with the installation. So if it's a file or an application that you really want to make sure is installed correctly, I'd recommend using the yes or no with a user input, because you can verify it, and if it's not, you can leave this question on the screen. You can go, clean up whatever you need to, or attempt to do a repair on the computer to where it'll accept the installation or download whatever prerequisites you might need for that program for it to install correctly. And then you can come back to this, hit no, and this is going to go right back to the beginning. It's going to say, please wait, installing Adobe Acrobat. It's going to start the same process, and it's going to try and install it. So there are use cases for either or. In my scripts, I have both of these styles of do loops because there are certain things that I want to say yes to. One of the ones is mainly as antivirus. I have this automatically install the antivirus that we use on our endpoints, and I like to make sure that I have manual control over that, so I do have time to verify that it has installed correctly, and then I can continue on with it, just because there are some weird things that do occur. Well, guys, I've rambled on long enough. I think you've probably had enough. This is almost an hour-long video again. I do apologize, but there's a lot to cover in this. Play around with them. Do loops and if-else statements are absolute great tricks, especially when you're trying to create these installation menus and applications to make your life a little bit easier for automated installation of files. I'll show you guys the full script of what I have. That this is all based off of my trials and errors and getting things to work and whatnot. I just need to clean up a few things in the scripts so no sensitive information gets out. But the good thing with this is this is a small snippet of how I pre-deploy computers. So we get brand new computers from our supplier. I boot them up, I do the basic Windows stuff, I put a local admin account on there, and from that local admin account, I execute this script twice. Because I have the first set, it changes the name of the computer to what I want it to be matched to. It changes a couple of other things in the registry, so it allows RDP connections and things like that, so I can configure this computer remotely without having to be in front of it, but I can still use PowerShell. So I'll show you guys what those tricks look like in the next one. So just look out for that video, but like I said, this is only a small snippet of what I actually do use on a daily basis. I'm in the process of configuring 250 machines, and I run this PowerShell script multiple times a day on multiple different computers, and it's mostly automated. I don't have to touch Google Chrome, I don't have to touch Firefox, I don't have to touch the antivirus installation. There's very minimal interaction with this from me. Just because the way I've got these if-else statements written in and these do loops written in. So play around with them, learn them. Best place to do this is in your Visual Studio Code, because if you mess something up in here, at least it's not executing and running in a full environment, and you don't have to worry about breaking something. And if you do, make sure that you have a backup of that machine that you can get back to in the event you do mess something up to the point where you can't recover it. Good thing is there are a few instances in PowerShell that will occur with, so if you do something, odds are you can probably undo it with PowerShell, as long as it's not a catastrophic event that you do within PowerShell. Alright guys, have a great night, stay coding, see you next time.